When I moved states to escape my toxic family, not a single person checked on me, not once. Then one night my security app pinged, and I opened the camera feed, only to see my entire family huddled on my porch, crying, begging for me to let them in. They didn't know I could hear every word. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Alden Price, 32, and I spent most of my life quietly shouldering burdens that weren't mine. My mother, Marjorie, always praised my brother, Keaton, while I was left to pay for his debts, medical bills, even his wedding, and told I was selfish for ever saying no. Lila, Keaton's wife, pushed him to keep asking for more, thinking I was too soft-hearted to refuse, and Rowan, my cousin, always encouraged their schemes. I loved my family, or at least I thought I did, but after decades of being used, I knew I had to leave. I packed my life into a moving truck and drove to Utah, finding a small, secluded home where I could finally breathe. At first, it was peaceful, too peaceful. Weeks turned into months, and not a single call, text, or message came from any of them. The silence confirmed what I already feared. They valued me only for what I could give, not who I was. I started restoring furniture, hiking the nearby trails, and slowly, painfully, I began to feel like myself again. For peace of mind, I installed security cameras around the property, thinking it would just be a precaution for wildlife or the occasional passerby. I never imagined I'd catch the people who were supposed to love me most. Then, one night at 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. I swiped to see motion at the edge of the yard. At first, I thought it was a deer, but then I saw human shadows moving closer. My heart stopped when I recognized them. My mother, my brother, Lila, and Rowan, muddy and panicked, whispering urgently, desperately calling my name. They rattle the door, thinking I'm asleep, pleading for a place to stay, for forgiveness, for something I no longer owe them. I stand frozen, listening to their voices that once demanded everything from me without hesitation. My mother's tone, trying to justify years of neglect, only reignites the hurt I've carried for decades. Keaton blames his own mistakes on me, claiming I should have helped him, while Lila encourages him, as if I'm obligated to fix their lives. Rowan even suggests breaking a window to get inside. For the first time, I realize just how far I've come. I don't move. I watch silently as my family's desperation lays bare the truth. They never loved me for me. They only ever loved what I could give. And for the first time in my life, I feel a quiet, steady sense of control. I'm no longer the person who bends to their demands. I'm free, finally, to choose myself. Growing up, I was always the invisible one in my family, the quiet backup no one really noticed until they needed something. My mother, Marjorie, showered Keaton with praise, calling him her golden son, while I was constantly reminded of my place. Pay for this, cover that, make sure everything went smoothly for everyone else. If I hesitated, if I dared to say no once, I was labeled selfish, ungrateful, or cold-hearted. I remember the nights I sat alone in my room, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand why my own mother treated me like I was disposable, while cheering on Keaton for simply existing. By the time I was in my late 20s, the pattern was painfully clear. Keaton racked up debts, and somehow I was expected to cover them. When his car accident left him with medical bills he couldn't pay, I footed the entire cost, silently resenting the fact that my struggles and savings were never considered. Then came his wedding, a spectacle that drained my bank account and my energy, while Marjorie cooed over him and whispered to her friends about what a wonderful son he was. Lila encouraged him to push me further, knowing I'd cave, and Rowan, my cousin, seemed to relish the drama, egging them on. I began to understand that my family didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a resource, a means to their comfort. The final blow came after I moved away. I thought leaving would be a relief, a chance to finally build a life for myself without their constant demands. But then I discovered they celebrated my absence. Through snippets of conversation I overheard when I visited old friends back home, I realized they'd thrown a small party, laughing and saying, "Alden finally learned his place." My departure was treated not as a loss, but as a victory for them, a confirmation that I would no longer be a buffer for their mistakes. The pain hit me in waves. The years of sacrifice, the endless giving, and the silent suffering all crystallized in that one moment. It was a betrayal so deep it made every past slight feel sharper. I spent countless hours replaying memories in my mind, piecing together the mosaic of my childhood and adulthood, and seeing it for what it was, manipulation, entitlement, and emotional exploitation. Each bill I paid, each favor I granted, had been taken for granted. Each time I tried to assert my own needs, I was punished or made to feel guilty. They never questioned their behavior. They never apologized. They only expected more. That understanding hardened something inside me. I realized I was done being used. The scars of those years of invisible suffering fueled a quiet determination. I would no longer allow their manipulation to dictate my life. I would stand firm, establish boundaries, and reclaim the dignity that had been denied to me for decades. The betrayal had cut deep, but from that pain grew the resolve that would eventually shape the course of my revenge. I understood now that freedom didn't come from running alone. It came from seeing clearly who you truly are and refusing to be anything less than your own person. And for the first time, I felt ready to do exactly that. For the first time in my life, I built days that belonged entirely to me. My mornings started with the soft hum of my workshop heater and the smell of sawdust settling in the air. Restoration woodworking became more than a hobby. It became a kind of therapy. I'd take abandoned, broken pieces of furniture and slowly bring them back to life. Every crack I filled, every scratch I sanded out, felt like a wound in me being smoothed over. My hands, once tired from carrying everyone else's burdens, finally worked for my own peace. When I wasn't in the workshop, I was out hiking the ridges behind my cabin. Utah's silence was different from the silence I'd grown up with. The silence back home meant tension, waiting for the next demand, the next guilt trip. Here, silence meant freedom. The pine trees didn't judge me, the mountains didn't expect anything from me, and the wide blue sky didn't twist my words into something ugly. I breathed easier than I had in years. And then there was May Bishop. I met her on a trail one evening when her dog darted toward me, tail wagging wildly. May apologized with a laugh, and somehow that simple, genuine warmth cracked open a part of me I didn't realize had gone numb. She was in her 60s, sharp-witted, gentle, and perceptive in a way that made me feel seen without feeling exposed. She'd bring over homemade bread, or stop by to chat about the town's gossip, or simply sit on my porch with me as the sun set behind the ridge. She was the first person in my life who didn't want anything from me. Not money, not favors, not pieces of my soul. Just my company. That alone felt like a miracle. I didn't realize how tightly I had been holding my breath for 32 years until, suddenly, it felt like I was finally breathing correctly. No obligations, no guilt, no manipulation, just quiet days and steady healing. But peace has a strange way of warning you before it leaves. One night, at exactly 2 a.m., my phone buzzed beside my bed. A motion alert from the security camera at the far edge of my property. I blinked groggily, grabbed my phone, and saw a flicker of movement, something tall and shadowy slipping between the trees. My heart jumped, but I forced myself to dismiss it. Out here, deer roamed freely. Elk too, even the occasional black bear. I set the phone down and convinced myself it was nothing. The next night, the alert came again. Same time, same camera. But this time, when I tapped the screen, the shape lingering at the border of my yard didn't move like an animal. It stood upright, still, watching, a very human silhouette. My breath stalled in my chest. The peace I had cherished began to feel fragile, like frost on glass. I stared at the screen long after the figure slipped back into the darkness. Something was out there. Someone. And suddenly the quiet life I had built no longer felt untouched. The storm I thought I'd escaped was closer than I ever imagined. The alerts kept coming night after night until they stopped feeling like random blips and started feeling like a pattern, an intentional one. Every night, sometime between 1:45 and 2:10 a.m., the cameras caught movement along the tree line. A figure circling, drifting close, then pulling back. At first it was just one silhouette. Then I noticed more 3, sometimes 4 shapes slipping between the shadows like ghosts with a purpose. My heartbeat became familiar with that late-night jolt of adrenaline, a tension I couldn't shake no matter how many times I convinced myself it was hikers, campers, or lost travelers. Deep down, I knew better. By the 7th night, the alerts came earlier, just past midnight. Something told me to grab my phone immediately. When I opened the live feed, the breath left my lungs. There, stumbling into the view of my porch camera, were faces I knew too well. Mud-covered shoes, frantic eyes, clothes wrinkled as if they'd been worn for days. My family. My mother, Marjorie, clinging to the railing like she was about to collapse. Keaton pacing in circles, cursing under his breath. Lila holding her coat tightly around her, but still shaking. And Rowan scanning the property like he expected someone to attack. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just stared at the screen, not believing what I was seeing. They looked nothing like the people who once told me I was ungrateful, dramatic, cold. They looked small, afraid, desperate. Then I heard it, the sound that made my stomach twist. A loud, frantic rattling at my front door. "Alden," Keaton hissed. "Open the damn door. He has to be asleep," bang harder. Lila's voice came next, cracked and trembling. "Please just try again. He'll let us in if he knows it's us." They had no idea I could hear every word. My cabin was dark. I hadn't turned on a single light. They must have assumed I wasn't home. I should have gotten up. I should have shouted. I should have done something. Instead, I sat frozen, my phone trembling in my hand as I watched them through the safety of the screen. My mind raced with questions. Why were they here? How did they find me? What had driven them across state lines in the dead of night? Then Marjorie's voice rose above the wind, sharp, panicked, and dripping with the same bitterness I grew up swallowing. "This is his fault," she snapped. "All of this is because Alden refused to help us. If he had just done what we asked, like he's supposed to, we wouldn't be out here like beggars." Those words hit me harder than any fist could have. Like he's supposed to. As if my entire existence was their safety net, their financial cushion, their emotional punching bag. Even now, even in mud and desperation, they couldn't see me as anything but a tool. My chest tightened, years of buried hurt roaring back to the surface. I didn't go to the door. I didn't speak. I just watched, silent and hidden, as the people who broke me stood on my porch, demanding access to a life they never helped me build. And for the first time, I felt something powerful settle in my bones. Not fear, not guilt. Clarity. Through the microphone feed, the chaos unraveling on my porch grew sharper, clearer, uglier. What started as panic knocking turned into full-blown arguing. Marjorie's voice cut through first, sharp enough to make my shoulders tense. "This is ridiculous, Keaton. If you hadn't messed everything up, we wouldn't be out here." Keaton fired back immediately, his voice shaking with anger, or maybe fear. "I messed everything up? You're the one who told me it would work. You said Alden would help. You swore he would." I leaned closer to the phone, unable to look away. My heart hammered, but not from fear. From recognition. This was the same script they used my entire life. Blame each other, then agree it was all my responsibility anyway. Keaton paced across the porch, hands gripping his hair. "I wouldn't have lost my job if I had the startup money. We could have launched it in time." But he refused. He just refused like he didn't know what was at stake. My jaw tightened. The startup he was talking about was a shady business scheme he'd tried to suck me into, a barely legal operation his friend pitched to him in a bar. He begged me for 10 grand. When I said no, he'd called me selfish, told the whole family I didn't care if they succeeded. And now here he was, acting like my lack of investment had ruined his life. Lila's voice entered the mix next, cracked and tired. "Keaton, stop yelling. Please. I told you he'd help if you explained it right. Alden's always been soft. He never lets us struggle." My fingers curled tightly around the phone. Soft. Not kind. Not generous. Soft. A word that implied weakness, foolishness, something bendable and convenient. Marjorie let out an exhausted groan. "Well, he owes us after everything we did for him. We're his family." There it was. The entitlement. The expectation. The belief that my existence was tied to their comfort. Rowan, ever the instigator, kicked lightly at the side of the house. "We're wasting time. If he's not answering, break a window. We can explain once we're inside. He won't throw us out after that." My blood went cold. They didn't just want help. They wanted access. Control. A place to land after their lives imploded. Paid for and maintained by me. I watched Keaton step toward a window, fingers hovering like he was testing how easily it might shatter. "No," Lila whispered, grabbing his arm. "Not yet. Just give him more time to wake up." Wake up. As if I were sleeping. As if I hadn't been wide awake my entire life while they drained me dry. Listening to them, hearing the entitlement layered in every word, something inside me clicked into place. A resolve so solid it felt like steel replacing bone. This time, I wouldn't open the door. This time, I wouldn't throw away my peace to save people who had never once saved me. This time, I wouldn't be their solution. I lowered the phone slowly, my hand steady. Let them stand out there. Let them feel the cold. Let them understand what it's like to be shut out by the people you thought should care. For once, I wasn't the weak one. I wasn't the soft one. I was the one in control. Alden didn't move from his spot near the window. The living room was dim, lit only by the glow from the security monitor, but he preferred it that way. Darkness made it easier to think. Outside, his family still paced around the porch, arguing, plotting, assuming he'd fold like he always did. They had no idea he was hearing every word. Instead of stepping outside and confronting them, Alden simply watched. Silent. Still. Letting every sentence sink deep into him. Keaton's whining about losing everything. Lila admitting she'd pushed him to try Alden again. Marjorie insisting it was Alden's responsibility to save them because he was the successful one. Rowan, always the loudest, suggesting they break a window to force their way in. It was almost surreal to hear how little they thought of him, how useful they believed he was. Not loved, not valued, just useful. His phone buzzed on the table. May, the only person who had never asked him for anything but honesty. He answered in a whisper. They're outside. All of them. May exhaled, long and steady. And you're inside. Safe. Remember, you don't owe them rescue just because they're drowning. Alden closed his eyes. It feels wrong to leave them out there. What feels wrong, May said gently, is that they expect you to destroy yourself so they can stand again. You tried that for years. You're allowed to stop. Her words grounded him, more than she knew. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't heartless. He was done being the family bandage they tore off and slapped back on whenever convenient. He hung up and opened his laptop. If they wanted to accuse him of being selfish, fine. But this time, he would protect himself properly. No yelling, no chaos, no emotional breakdowns they could twist against him. He would handle this the clean way, the smart way. He pulled up his security archives. Everything was recorded. The insults, the accusations, Rowan testing the windows, Marjorie blaming him for Keaton's failures. Every second was time-stamped, clear, indisputable. Perfect. Alden saved the clips into a secured folder labeled Family Trespass, Evidence. Next, he drafted the first version of the cease and desist letter. It felt strange typing legal terms about the people who once shared his childhood home, but his hands didn't shake. Not even once. He added property line photos, time-stamped warnings, and the clause about future police involvement. If they pushed this, there would be consequences, real ones. His revenge wasn't about hurting them. It was about breaking the pattern that had kept him trapped under their control for years. A quiet revenge. A firm one. The kind that left no doors open for manipulation. When he finished, Alden looked back at the screen showing his family stealing glances at the house like wolves circling prey. He breathed out slowly. This time, he wasn't the prey. He finally had a plan, and he was going to follow it all the way through. Dawn crept slowly over the horizon, washing the sky in pale blue as Alden finally unlocked the front door. The air was cold, the wood of the porch damp under his feet. For a moment, he just stood there, letting the quiet settle. His family, exhausted, slumped on patio chairs and bundled in blankets they'd dragged from their cars, looked up in unison when the door opened. Marjorie gasped first. Alden, thank God. We were so worried about you. She hurried toward him, arms outstretched, as if the night's insults had never happened. He stepped back, refusing the embrace. Keaton gave a shaky laugh. Man, you had us freezing out here. Come on, don't be dramatic. We're family. Lila's eyes brimmed with instant tears, and she clutched his arm without permission. We didn't mean any of it. We were just stressed. You know we love you. Rowan, trying to look composed, merely nodded. Let's all calm down. We just need a place to breathe. Their rehearsed sympathy might have moved him once. Not today. Alden's face stayed unreadable, calm, quiet, almost gentle, but with a sharpness beneath it none of them had ever seen. He reached into his pocket and tapped his phone. A speaker clicked on, and then their voices filled the porch. You think he'll say no? Alden's too soft, he always folds. Break a window if we have to. He owes us. It's his fault Keaton didn't invest. He ruined everything. We deserve his help. We're family. Each line slammed into the morning stillness like a hammer. Marjorie's face drained of color. Keaton stiffened, his jaw tightening. Lila's hand dropped from his arm as if burned. Rowan froze, shoulders rigid, eyes flicking to the security cameras as if realizing too late how much they'd exposed. Alden didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. That, he said quietly, is who you were when you thought I couldn't hear you. No one spoke. The recording continued for a few seconds, Rowan muttering about smashing a window, Keaton cursing Alden under his breath. Then Alden pressed stop. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Lila swallowed. Alden, we were overwhelmed. You know we didn't mean. Keaton snapped. Oh, come on. You're really doing this? After everything we've done for you, you're going to throw one bad night in our faces? You're unbelievable. Alden lifted his eyes. There it was. The real Keaton. The real family. The truth breaking through their fake concern. Ungrateful. The word echoed in the cold air like a verdict. Alden let it settle before he spoke. You finally said something honest. Keaton blinked, confused and furious. Alden stepped back toward the open doorway, his voice steady as stone. And that's why you're not coming inside. Alden didn't step back inside. He stood firmly on the porch, the rising sun at his back, casting him in a quiet kind of authority he had never felt before. His family shifted uneasily under that stillness, like they were finally realizing this wasn't the Alden they could guilt, push, or bend anymore. You want to talk? Alden said calmly. Fine. Let's talk. Marjorie forced a maternal smile. Sweetheart, we've all made mistakes. No, he cut in, voice low and steady. I'm going to speak. For once, you're going to listen. They went silent. Alden began listing everything they pretended never happened. How his mother had praised Keaton for failing upward, while calling Alden selfish, for buying groceries instead of covering Keaton's gambling debt. How they'd drained his college fund to pay for Keaton's wedding. How he'd been berated for saying no even once. How they'd celebrated when he moved out, hearing from an aunt that Marjorie said, he's finally learned his place. He laid out the dates, the dollar amounts, the exact words spoken, things he had carried for years. Marjorie tried to interrupt, her voice rising. Alden, you're exaggerating. We never. December 14th, Alden said without emotion. You called me at 2 a.m. to transfer $800 because Keaton got drunk and crashed his car. When I hesitated, you told me I was lucky to even be part of this family. Want me to keep going? Her mouth snapped shut. Keaton scoffed loudly. So you kept receipts? That's pathetic, man. Alden leveled a cold stare at him. I kept them because you all pretended none of it ever happened. Lila, eyes red and narrowed, stepped forward. We're family. Family helps each other. And right now, we need you. Alden shook his head. No. What you need is someone to save you from consequences. And that's not going to be me. Stop acting superior. Keaton barked. We're staying here whether you like it or not. Alden didn't flinch. No, you aren't. Right on cue, the distant crunch of tires on gravel filled the air. A patrol car rolled up the driveway. The family spun around in disbelief. What did you do? Rowan hissed. I called earlier, Alden said, still calm. Trespassing. Attempted break-in. I let them know the situation. 2 officers stepped out, one resting a hand on his belt. Morning. You the homeowner? Yes, Alden said. They've refused to leave, tried to force entry, and made threats about breaking my window. Keaton exploded. He's lying. We're his family. The officer didn't look convinced. Doesn't matter. He asked you to leave. This is private property. Within minutes, his family was being walked back to their cars, furious, humiliated, shouting half-formed excuses and accusations. Marjorie's voice cracked as she yelled his name, but Alden didn't respond. The moment their engines faded down the road, the quiet that followed was unlike anything he'd ever known. For the first time in his life, Alden felt power settle over him, steady, warm, and wholly his. The letters started showing up 2 days later. At first, Alden thought the wind had blown trash into his mailbox, but when he opened it, he saw his mother's handwriting, tight, rushed, shaky. Inside was a single page filled with accusations. How could you do this to us? We're your family. You embarrassed us in front of strangers. No apology. No accountability. Just anger masquerading as hurt. The next day, there were 2 more letters. One from Keaton, written in the same childish scrawl he'd used to forge Alden's signature when they were teenagers. You ruined everything. You're acting like some victim. Grow up and let us stay. The second letter, from Lila, switched between begging and blaming in the same breath, as if she didn't know which tactic might work better on him. By the end of the week, the mailbox was full almost every morning. Some letters were soaked from sitting overnight in the cold. Others were shoved in with so much force they tore at the edges. Every envelope was a piece of the same cycle Alden had escaped. Demand, guilt, manipulation, repeat. Each time he walked back up the gravel path to his porch, clutching a new handful of their words, May would be waiting in her rocking chair across her own porch, watching him with the soft, steady gaze of someone who had lived through her own storms. "Another batch?" she'd ask gently. Alden would nod, dropping them onto the table inside without opening them yet. Yeah, May never pushed him to talk before he was ready. Instead, she brewed tea, made him sit on her porch swing, and let the silence do the work. Slowly, Alden started to open the letters, not to respond to them, but to confront the parts of his past he had always shoved aside. Every sentence was a mirror reflecting who they truly were. Every paragraph confirmed what he already suspected. Love had never been the currency in his family, only usefulness. One afternoon, after reading a particularly manipulative note from Marjorie insisting he owed her his entire life because she raised him, Alden felt something inside him crack, not in a painful way, but like glass splitting after too much pressure. A release. "They never loved me, May," he said, voice small but clear. "They loved what I could do for them." May reached out, resting her warm hand over his. That realization hurts. But it's the truth that sets you free. That night, Alden sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by the security of his quiet home, and wrote one final letter. It wasn't vengeful. It wasn't emotional. It was clear, firm, and final. He outlined boundaries they could no longer cross, the history they would no longer rewrite, and the life he intended to live without their chaos. The next morning, he placed it in the outgoing mail, closed the little red flag on the mailbox, and walked back to his house without looking over his shoulder. For the first time, he felt the chapter truly end. Spring came to the valley slowly, warming the snowmelt into soft streams along the foothills. By then, Alden had built a life so different from the one he left behind that some mornings he barely recognized himself. And that was the best part. Therapy sessions every Thursday helped him untangle decades of knots he'd carried in his chest. His woodworking shop, once just a quiet hobby, turned into a thriving business after May insisted on showcasing his pieces at the local craft fair. People loved his work: tables with river blue inlays, hand-carved mantel beams, intricate jewelry boxes that felt alive under your fingertips. For the first time, Alden wasn't just surviving. He was living. He'd started forming genuine relationships, too. People who asked how he was because they cared, not because they needed a favor. It felt unreal at first, sitting around a fire pit with neighbors, laughing so hard his ribs hurt. They saw him, not as a resource or a scapegoat, but as a person worth knowing. It was everything he never had growing up. Then, one afternoon, while picking up lumber from the town supply store, he overheard Keaton's name. Two men at the counter were shaking their heads, laughing under their breath. Apparently, Keaton had driven into town months earlier, ranting in the local diner that Alden was a backstabbing traitor who abandoned his family. He'd tried to spin some heroic story about himself, but no one bought it. Too many people knew the police report. Word had spread fast. Alden didn't feel satisfaction, just a distant sadness, the kind you feel for someone still drowning in their own patterns. He paid for his supplies and left without a word. Life settled again, steady and peaceful, until one late summer evening when his door camera pinged. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and rose, when the figure came into view, Rowan. Alden's stomach tightened, not in fear this time, but in bracing. Rowan stood alone on the porch, no dramatic banging, no shouting. Just a quiet knock. Alden stepped outside, leaving the door behind him. Rowan looked thinner, older somehow, but his expression was steady. "I'm not here to make excuses," Rowan said, voice rough. "I came to apologize. Properly." Alden didn't speak. Rowan continued, confessing things Alden never knew. How Marjorie had always pitted the family against him. How she'd trained them to rely on Alden like a lifeline. How she mocked him behind closed doors for being too soft to ever fight back. Rowan admitted he hated himself for playing along. "I don't expect forgiveness," he finished quietly. "But you deserve to know the truth." Alden nodded slowly. Not agreeing, not absolving, just acknowledging. "Thank you for telling me." Rowan left with no expectation of anything more. When the dust settled and silence returned, Alden felt an unexpected clarity. He didn't need revenge anymore. He didn't need apologies. He didn't need closure from anyone but himself. He chose himself, his peace, his home, his future. And that was the real victory, reclaiming a life that was always meant to be his. Do you believe Alden made the right choice by finally choosing his own peace over the people who kept breaking him? Or do you think he should have given his family one more chance? I'm really curious to hear your take, so drop your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this keep you hooked, Make sure you hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new one.